Listen up. There's no more excuses.
We're empowering those who want the hustle by exposing the status quo.
The days of ordinary are over.
It's time to crush mediocrity and start discovering your greatest potential.
Welcome to the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation.
Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, as always, we've got a real treat. Mr. Stu Draper is in the house. Stu is founder and board member at Stukent and Chairman CMO at Potup. Also, author, educator, angel investor. What else is there, Stu?
Oh, I'm a dad of 4 beautiful kids and a happy husband.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. Excited for the conversation. Tell our listeners a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are now. You've had your hands into a lot of different things, from academia to podcasting now, writing. Tell us about the story.
Yeah. I would say the journey as far as career goes stems back to a 2-year mission I did for my church in Argentina. One of the things that gave me excitement of joining your show, Hustle Nation, was your byline that talks about crushing mediocrity. I have a vivid memory from being with one of my companions on my mission down in Argentina. We're walking the streets at night and we'd had a rough day and not a lot of success. And I just felt like we were like any other couple of missionaries out doing work. And I said, you know what, Elder? I have a deep disdain for mediocrity. Like, I don't enjoy this. I'm not having fun right now because we're not succeeding. I want to succeed. I want to win, and I want to do big. I want to help a lot of people, not a few people. We're only helping a few people right now, and I'm sure I could go way further back in life and point to other things where I realized I just don't like to be average. Sports in high school, baseball and wrestling definitely helped with that. But I would say that's where the genesis, like where I decided I wanted to go do big things with my career. That led to my desire for big in my career. And so I had 3 mega failures young in my career. First, I tried used car sales. The lot had like 30 cars on it. It had about 3 people per day, and there were 3 salespeople coming to the lot. There's three visitors coming to the lot, potential customers. So I got 1 try a day at selling a car. I had 4 cars that were like the kind of car the person wanted. It just didn't work, right? I got fired like 2 months later. They fired me rather than say, hey, by the way, like our business is failing. This isn't going to work out. They closed their doors like a month later, but they had the guts to fire me. I can't believe that looking back on it. But at the time, dude, I took it so personal. I tried summer sales down in Southern California, selling alarms, knocking doors. One of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. I stunk at it. Barely broke even on the whole summer. I have had friends go make tens of thousands of dollars in 3 months. Me, no, not so much. And then I got my first job out of college selling property management software. All these things ended up helping me in my career. But, dude, I got the job in June. I start really winning. And the summer's great. Get to the end of summer, they like, hey, you're our guy. You're going to be our leader soon. And go through fall, I'm still doing the best. And then this is 2008. It's a funded startup, and they pulled 16 of us in a room and said, hey, we know you didn't get your paychecks today. We don't have a way to hit payroll this month, and you can all go home. And so my third job, my poor wife is going, oh my gosh, like we already made a baby together, know?
Yeah.
That's like the start of my career. It was really hot. I definitely was wearing sunglasses. My future was bright. And at the time I had kind of started moonlighting, helping my brother-in-law do Google ads for his dental practice. Guy had 3 record-breaking months of new patients from my work there. And so rather than look for another job, where I could get fired for a fourth time, I went ahead and I just started helping dentists with their Google ads. And I fell into entrepreneurship super young, too young. I wish now, looking back, that I had had a little more experience watching other leaders, watching other managers. But it was the life for me. And I bootstrapped Get Found First, learned a lot from the experience of bootstrapping. Had a cool opportunity to go back and teach digital marketing because I had been running a Google ad agency. My professor called me and said, "Hey, you want to come teach?" And as I taught, I realized the curriculum was outdated and needed work. Looked at what other opportunities were out there and found that, not what other opportunities. I looked for what other products were out there to help professors teach digital marketing. And I found that they were all outdated. And we called these schools and asked them, "What are you doing to teach digital marketing?" And everything sounded awful. And I would say at the end, "Hey, if we built XYZ for you, would you be interested in that?" And, in 2013, Google's been around making billions for a decade now, right?
Yep.
And 40% of business schools still weren't teaching their kids digital marketing. And the 60% that were very unhappy with how they were doing it. So that was the idea that was like the reason I decided to go and start my biggest win and success in my career so far, which is Stukent. Stukent's an ed tech company, grew it from 2013 through 2024. And then in February of this year, I stepped away from that business. So that's my, I tried to make that short and sweet, Chris. That's a long answer to your question, but hopefully it gives people a feel for like the genesis of myself as an entrepreneur, and it helps people see that, if you're the one that's failing, or if you're the one that's in the bootstrap small business, or if you're going and growing, I can relate to all of you. I've been there.
And Stu, you didn't talk about Potup yet, which I know we'll get to, but Stukent came to my attention, I think 2 years ago now. I started, for the first time, I was an adjunct social media marketing professor at a local university.
Okay.
And that's when I became aware of it. And so when I was kind of building my Rolodex of podcast guests, and you can only really say that if you're over 40, by the way, and use the word Rolodex, but it came to my attention that you were not only associated, but you were the founder. And I'm very curious in the academia space. It is very different than the entrepreneurial space. I too was teaching out of a textbook that, while was very good, it was dated, and a lot of the strategies and tactics that they were talking about, the language that they would use, I didn't use in 6 years in the agency space. No one talked like that. No one ever said this is a strategy. So I'm teaching stuff that, for the record, I would never talk about or teach or work with my clients. And I've been in marketing, around marketing, for 20 years. And so I'm just curious, you talk about why you got into the academia space, because that is a big pivot from the business world and the entrepreneur space.
Yeah. So bingo, you nailed it. What you just said is why I decided to start Stukent. And the reason I was teaching wasn't because I had aspirations to become a professor. I wanted to help my alma mater, and my professor called me and said, "Hey, can you come teach for a semester?" And I decided to jump on that opportunity, not because I knew that I wanted to do it forever, but because I knew the opportunities that could stem from having taught at the university level. I didn't have a master's degree. I told the professor that called me, "Hey, I don't even have a master's."
Yeah.
And he said, "You know what? I'm the dean of the school, and I get to choose, and we'll still be accredited at the level we're going to have accreditation. So you'll be adjunct, and you can do this." And so I knew it wasn't good money, but I knew it would develop me. I knew it would lead to other good opportunities. And so I jumped on that experience. And by the way, at the same time I did that, I took a couple of years and I worked for a $2 billion, well, at the time they were a $1 billion annual sales company. And I got to work directly with the founder and help him with his online reputation management. And he's a billionaire, right? And that was another thing I did, not because I had aspirations to do that job forever, but because I knew that those experiences would help me in the future Stu, in who I wanted to become, right? And by the way, hanging out with billionaires changes you. It gives you a different perspective and helps you think differently than others. So if you get the opportunity to hang out with people that are a level or 2 or 10 above you, do it. You got to do it. How it changes you and helps you is if you're a hustler, if you're the type that subscribes to Hustle Nation, you will benefit from that.
So Stu, you're no longer involved, at least not on a daily basis, with Stukent. What does that business and that organization look like? Because obviously academia has changed quite a bit. Enrollment's down. Even one of the reasons I was brought in to be an adjunct professor, probably no different than you, was students were clamoring to learn from people who had done it before, who had been in the space.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious what that looks like now.
Yeah, Stukent is going and growing. I'm very proud that both GetFoundFirst.com, which I sold in 2015, and Stukent, which I turned over I turned over my majority ownership to a private equity group in 2021, to a great group of partners called Tritium Partners. Both businesses have more than doubled since I first brought in other investors and owners in those businesses. And Stukent is now like over 160 people. There's 105 or 110 or so in Idaho Falls, Idaho, where we're headquartered. The rest are spread out across the nation, and still going and growing. I think the real thing that keeps it going and growing, Chris, at a time when education's struggling, is that education is struggling because of the old model of publishing. A big part of the problem with higher ed is that we're a system built around professors that don't have time to create their own curriculum every semester. And they don't have time to stay engaged in the day-to-day of what's changing in industry. And so, but Pearson and McGraw-Hill and the other large major publishers, they haven't done a great job of keeping up there. And because they haven't, it's led to businesses like Stukent being able to come in and be a savior to these professors. Our mission at Stukent is help educators, help students, help the world. And I say our mission because I still feel like I'm deeply a part of it. I'm on the board. Love our new CEO, Jim Holm, came to us after spending time at Certiport and a few other very successful education businesses. So yeah, it's been a good journey so far with them.
So Stu, one of the things that jumps out to me as you talk about each one of your steps is this consistent ability to take chances and learn along the way. I mean, the path you just went on at step 1, you would have never been able to predict step 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And yeah. I think a lot of times, so I'll use myself as an example. So my daughter's 17, she's going to be a senior, so college visits are imminent, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many people that at that age are trying to prescribe what the next 25 years of that person's life is going to be, right? And I think what I've seen is that rarely is reality. And candidly, if it's that predictable, to your point, it probably is mediocre.
Yeah.
Right? Those that really are breaking through, they're not planning a 25-year line. So just curious of your mindset. You kind of joke about it of, God bless your wife for being supportive with you each step of the way, which certainly that's critical too.
Absolutely.
But could you share a little bit about just, what was your mindset in each one of those pieces? Because, looking back on it, it's easy to look back and say like, oh, well, this led to this, which led to this, which led to success. But at the time, I'm sure that's not how it felt.
No, definitely not how it felt. And I got to comment, Dustin, I appreciate what you said about your daughter's situation at 17. If you rewind time, I'm 40 now, so 23 years ago, if you say, Stu, what do you want to do for your career? I can't tell you that I want to write a textbook about digital marketing. I literally can't tell you that. Because guess what? Digital marketing isn't a thing yet. Right?
True.
And to tell you that I'm going to do Google ads for dentists, and then I'm going to have this opportunity to go work for a billionaire, like, you just can't have a crystal ball in life for some of those things. And I think it's really important that the as parents, as educators, we have to help the rising generation understand that and embrace the unknown of it all, and go to work developing themselves, preparing themselves so that they can adjust and adapt to the new world that's going to exist for them that doesn't exist yet. So in your daughter's case, she could say today, I'm going to have a career doing prompt writing for AI. Okay. That could be a career path for her. But if we rewind time to when she was 14 or 13, she can't say that. Like, she could if she had like the most futuristic dad on the planet, Dustin, and you were like, oh, I'm playing with ChatGPT version 1. I'm helping create the learning models, the language learning models. And by the way, they have been writing language learning models for a decade. Like, that's been a thing. But
she doesn't have a smart enough dad for that, but that's fair.
Yeah. And so I think my mindset has always been, I'm going to live right, work hard, and be brave enough to jump on opportunities when they come my way. And that's what I've done. And it's blessed my life a ton. And then I've had a spouse, like you mentioned, Dustin, that supports that. That's okay with the risk of being brave.
Yeah, for sure. So as you look at, the future, right? So it's an interesting time. I mean, I want to take a step back. Can you talk a little bit about the transition you went through, taking it basically a different role at Stukent, right? Because, in many ways I can only imagine, I mean, it's almost like another child with the time, energy, and effort you've put into it. The nights wondering if it's going to work, the nights wondering how we're going to make payroll, to, the growth and the challenges there. Can you just talk through, your mindset as you were kind of going through that process of saying, you know what, it's time for someone else to lead this?
Yeah. First, let me step into the early part of what you said around the nights where you're wondering how you're going to make payroll kind of thing. I had 4 years of that. So in the ed tech space, when you start a business, you have to, in the higher ed space especially, you have to plan on making money in January and September, twice a year. Online schools have helped us make money year round. There is a summer semester that gives you a little bit of income, but we added 100 universities year 1, 300 some universities year 2. We're going up on 500 and 600 universities after that. So we're going and growing, and it all feels amazing, but it still wasn't enough to bridge from January to September. So I had to get creative for 4 years straight. I did that, and learned a little too late what bridge loans are, because I should have used those and given up less equity and after round 1 of financing. But you live and learn from those experiences. Knowing my situation and the scenario I was in, it was probably for the best that it all ended up how it did, and it's all good for all investors involved. But I did go through those times, and it was my baby, like you said, and my speaking of babies, I had 2 more babies from 30 to 40, and or I guess maybe I only had 1 more baby from 30 to 40, but I've raised 4 kids, and my oldest went from age 6 to 17 over this last decade and a year or so, right? So he grew up with Stukent. My second to youngest, he's 11 now. So literally his entire life was during Stukent. And so, it's like very much a big part of my life. And leaving it, the full-time day-to-day operations, was not an easy decision. but it was the right decision. And I have regrets, things that I look back and probably would have done that different. But knowing the situation, knowing where what my skill sets are, and being authentic and true to who I am and what I want to do, it was time. And so I went to the chair of the board on a Friday phone call and said, I think it's going to be time for us to look for someone new. And I'd stayed on board about 2.5 years, thinking it might be 23 years before I leave this. I could do this for a long time. But in those 2.5 years after, so many things in the business evolved, changed, improved, and outgrew what would be best for me. And so I'm very proud of what we did while I was at the helm. Very proud of what's happening because of seeds we planted years ago. And it's going to be fun to watch it keep going and growing with others. And I think that's a really important thing for a founder to figure out, is how the business will run and go with or without them. And really, frankly, if I'm telling you the truth, after year 3 or 4, there was never a year where it couldn't have gone and grown without me. Those first 4, I needed the help that I had. Don't get me wrong, early team of Stukent, if you're listening today. but the fact is, those early years need the founder so much more than a developed team of 40 or 50 people. Like at that point,
for sure,
there's a lot of people that could lead a team of 40 or 50 people to greatness.
True.
It's the early stage stuff of finding a way to finance things and get investors to trust when it's still on that curve of figuring things out. That's really critical to the founders' work,
What's up, listeners? We've got some exciting news. We're launching a community. It's a private Facebook group called the Strategic Sales Accelerator. And we'd like to invite you to be a part of this exclusive group of sales professionals, executives, and business leaders. Members of this group will gain access to exclusive content, trainings, and webinars. Our content is designed to help users gain clarity and connection to the result, build efficiency, and ultimately attract more qualified leads, build more authority, and generate more sales, all without sacrificing burnout. We understand that rising tides lift all boats. And if you're interested in being a part of a community that's as hungry as you are, I encourage you to check out the link below. It takes just less than a minute to apply. So what are you waiting for? Click the link below and jump in now. Now back to the show. Stu, it sounds like Stukent was your first big entrepreneurial victory. You spent, including being a board member, almost 12 years in the organization. What is something you wish you knew before you started that journey? Or maybe a lesson now you can look back and you can teach your fellow entrepreneurs that this is where I went wrong, or this is what I wish I knew when I started that business.
Oh man, where to start with this one? Chris, that's a great question. I think number one for me, if I were to go back and talk to my younger self, it would be, don't be afraid of taking money to start a business. Get Found First was entirely bootstrapped, never raised a penny for it. I was the sole owner, and brought on a partner to have a minority stake a couple times, and neither of those panned out. But if I were to say any one thing, it's don't be afraid to take some money from investors. Because when you have investor money, you go into a different mindset that bootstrappers can't have a very hard time getting into, which is a mindset of, I have to go take what I've got and use it to grow, versus I have to take my own heart and soul and my own time and energy and find a way to win. And I can only rely on myself. It's all on me. And that mindset shift that comes from taking money and being able to say, I have to go take what they've given me and go make more out of it, is a different motivation. They both are great motivators, having to find a way on your own. But for me personally, the motivation that came from, I just took this man's money that I love and respect. He's an angel friend of mine. I'm going to get him a win. Do or die, I'm going to get him a win. And I'm going to use this money very wisely. I've got a deck of cards here or a hand of cards here to play. I'm going to play these cards right and win. So if I were to go back, that's what I would tell a younger Stu, for sure. That'd be the first thing I'd tell him is don't be afraid to take some money. And then next, if I were to say, if I got a second thing, is that okay, Chris, if I get a second thing to say?
Yeah, as much as you want.
This is what I would tell him next. I'd say, be sure that I wouldn't start with be sure. This is how I'd say it. It's just as easy to run a $20 million business as it is to run a $200,000 business. There's very little difference in the level of difficulty in running a $200,000 business as there is a $20 million business. And the thing is, it's just different difficulties, but they're both hard. Neither's easy. And so get excited about the building, managing, growing something that's bigger, because it's not going to get any more difficult just because it's bigger. The challenges evolve, they change. But from my experience, that's the truth of the matter. I remember when it was 300 grand in annual sales at Get Found First. And I remember when it was 3 million in annual sales at Stukent, and thinking to myself, if anything, this is a little easier right now at 3 million at Stukent than it was at 300,000 at Get Found First. That might in part be because of product style business versus service-based business. I think it's good for young entrepreneurs to go through the experience of running a service-based business. But after running a product-based business, I would never go back to running a service-based business.
So speaking of that, so what's next? Obviously you have Potup, you're getting your podcast going. What's you're clearly not someone that's going to sit around and not take another leap, another chance. So what's next?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that it's very deep in my nature to keep going and growing and to not feel like I'm stagnating. I have a hard time not wanting to be in the dirt, getting my hands a little dirty and doing a part of the work, not just investing and letting someone else get their hands dirty. But I also want to impact more people. And some of the best way to do that is just helping people with money. That's just what they need to go and grow. And they need a little bit of advice, but they don't need me in the day-to-day. So I'm trying to get to a place where I've got this podcast, Startups with Stu. And the goal is to connect with founders and connect them with investors and help them. I have a bleeding heart as an angel investor for startups and founders. And so I want to be able to go and impact more people. Stukent celebrated helping over 1 million students right as I got to the finish line of my tenure. And that is a very proud moment for me. One of the best things that I've done. Besides, I think for me personally, I'm proud of being an author. I'm proud of having employed over like 500 different people over the course of that time at Stukent, because they come and go. But having touched 1 million people's lives, and for a lot of them, I would say probably 200,000 or more of those million, like their career is improved and achieved because they used our platform. Like, how cool that is! That means a lot to me, having done that. That's a real why in life, right? The mission of help educators, help students, help the world, and then seeing it happen. Gosh, that means a lot to me. So I want to go do more of that. It doesn't have to be in education. In fact, right now, like I'm under the non-compete around more businesses and education. So ed tech founders have come to me, hey, would you mind being an angel investor? And that's not my jam right now. I can't. happy to do it down the road when that does make sense. But I'm really happy to be helping founders in general with all sorts of different businesses.
Stu, tell us about your book. You kind of glazed over that part. You didn't spend much time diving deep into that.
I've actually been a co-author in 2 books. I'm lesser known for my entrepreneurship co-authorship. So with Jen Riley, she wrote a textbook on entrepreneurship, and I stepped in for a few chapters to help. And I'm sure she rewrote 80% of what I wrote, but glad to be a part of that textbook with Jen Riley. She's an excellent professor and human being. And then Jeff Larson and I co-authored Digital Marketing Essentials, and we co-authored it and then self-published it because we wanted to be able to update it twice a year so that every semester it was more current and more relevant. We found out that professors don't like that level of relevance. They're okay not with you. They don't want you changing their textbook between over the Christmas break, right? Mm-hmm. So we stopped doing twice a year updates and switched to annual. But textbook publishers have been doing the annual or the digital publishing thing for a very long time. Over 50% of Pearson's students buy digital. That's what they buy. But the problem is, just because it's digital doesn't mean they're updating it annually. They're not keeping it current. Although that's probably the greatest benefit of it being digital. And one of their problems is that they have contracts that don't allow where their authors don't have to do updates every year. Our contracts with Stukent's authors say that every year you'll write the next update for us, and your royalties are associated with doing that. So I think as entrepreneurs, if you're looking for ways to innovate, sometimes those innovations come from things that are in your contracts with your creators and things that are in your contracts with your vendors. So it doesn't always have to be something you build or do different. It might just be a simple change in the way the industry used to do their contracts.
Stu, I'm curious, just with your background, in today's world, there's more information out there than ever before. Training and development is a big buzzword in a lot of companies about, how are we going to train and develop our team? Curious just what you've learned being in that space for so long. One of the ways I've kind of seen this is there's, people that say like, I learned by doing, right? So by being on the job, that's how I learned. There's some that are kind of in the mentorship camp where like, hey, let me just come along with me. And then there's those that are in more of the kind of online learning or, even in-person classes, right? Of like, I'm going to learn a topic, get tested on it, right? And be taught it and things like that. And I feel like there's very few that are kind of seeing it. And there's probably other categories that I'm not thinking about, but those are kind of like the 3 camps that I see. And to me, it's kind of like an any and all sort of strategy as opposed to one is better than the other.
Yeah.
But, just curious in being in the space, like what have you seen are ways, that someone can accelerate someone's learning and growth through different mediums and things like that?
Yeah. So one of the biggest innovations at Stukent is our simternships, simulated internships, where a student can study and read and get tested on what they remember from the reading, but they can also then go apply it in their simternship throughout the same semester, giving the student the chance to apply the things they were learning in the reading. And so you can see not just their ability to recollect the answer, but you can see their ability to apply the knowledge and for deeper comprehension. And that's a very powerful thing that's happening. Real world projects are another thing that Stukent does, or we've teamed up with businesses that have created like a problem or issue they're facing, and students then can go and create their plan of what they would do to solve that company's problem. And oftentimes that includes like recording the video of what they would record if they were the marketer that has to create content for that business or something. And so applied knowledge, I think, is again going to become a much bigger part of the education space. If it doesn't, then traditional education will continue to get beat up. And so that's something that's already happening. The public system is having to adjust and evolve because a lot of private online learning opportunities have come up where they're replacing the institutions' need to exist. By the way, I think something that will keep the higher ed institutions from failing is actually the tradition of the coming of age experience. And so continuing to deliver well on that experience. If universities do that, they will survive. The other thing they have to do right to survive is manage the sports world right. Because the tradition of going to the sporting events and getting to say, I've been a Beaver fan. I was born in my Oregon State Beavers gear, and I'm gonna go to Oregon State because I want to go be in Reser Stadium as a student, sit in the student section. Those two things will save traditional education if they evolve the other part, which is actually the education and good jobs that need to come from it. But if they only deliver here and they don't deliver on the better education and the better jobs that come from it, then these two won't do as well. They'll evolve into something different. NIL is obviously changing sports, right?
Yeah.
And so, by the way, Stukent has a cool textbook on NIL. It's updated annually, written by an author from Oklahoma State. They have some really innovative things they've done at Oklahoma State. So check that out if you're a listener and you're a professor. But it's going to be fun to see how all of the higher education system evolves.
Chris, you're on mute.
Stu, you said something that caught me as being very interesting, which is simternship. There are a lot of corporations out there, Fortune 500 or not, who are always looking for talent. And what better way to vet quality talent or to help create quality talent than put them through a simternship? Is that something that currently exists? And if so, who's doing it?
It doesn't exist in that corporations are using it as a testing ground for talent. Although that's a future we envision. It'll be really fun to watch that evolve. Today, we've just stayed so focused on the low-hanging fruit of higher education, supporting the professors and building for the semester-long experience. We've talked about mini simternships where in 3 or 4 hours you can do a test run and try something. But right now we're building for like a full semester long experience, right? And we've just really tried to stay focused on giving the professor exactly what they want so they can help their students and their students can go help the world. But Chris, it's not a bad idea. It's not a bad opportunity. It's a great opportunity. So,
maybe this is a workaround for your non-compete. I mean, who knows?
So there's a great innovative company called Mursion Learning, Mursion. Mursion Learning does simulations that corporations are using to train their team members. So like hotels, they basically have a VR headset and you're envisioning, you get to watch a potential hotel guest walk to the front desk and you reply to the questions the front desk visitor has. And so there's some really innovative things beginning to happen there. That's in the training world of corporations instead of the hiring world. So it'll be fun to watch how simulations continue to evolve the world. But with what AI is doing, simulations are going to go nuts over the next decade.
Well, it's interesting to me because now job hunting has evolved a lot for the job seeker, where if you go to Indeed and you apply for a job, they will give you maybe a different series of questions. See if you're competent in inside sales, outside sales, marketing, customer service. And to my knowledge, this is how some companies and their HR departments are vetting quality talent. But then again, I'm assuming like anything, any certification online, you can just go right to ChatGPT, you can go right to Google and probably get the answer for that question. So it may or may not be the best way to simulate let's call it qualifications or status. Someone might be qualified for this job, but to me, I think there's some opportunity there to ensure that you're really hiring the right folks.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
it'd be cool to go get a conversation going between Indeed and Stukent based on this conversation, Chris. So I
Let's
like
go.
it. That's awesome.
All right, Stu, before we wrap this up, tell us a little bit more about the podcast. You talked about it briefly. You've got some founders and you're trying to help founders get money. What does Startups with Stu look like right now?
Yeah, people have come to me, Chris, and said, "Hey, Stu, when would you have time for a lunch? Or can I take you to breakfast? Or can we hop on a call? I have some questions for you as I'm getting my business off the ground, right?" And I love to give free advice. I want to help people that are getting started. I've been in their shoes. I've felt what they're going through, and I know a lot of the answers for them. I know what they got to go do, and I'd love to tell them. But I don't want to. I want to scale that message. If I'm going to tell one person, I want it to be something that others can also hear, and to be able to tell people in the future. You just got to go listen to my podcast. Go subscribe and watch my episodes. And while you're working out or while you're traveling to work, go listen to this stuff. It'll help you because the one-offs are fun, and sometimes you can give more personalized advice. But what I'm trying to do is build the type of podcast where you can come and listen to an episode from an investor and hear their perspective, or another episode and you can hear from someone who's failed 4 times and they're coming to me for advice on how they're going to make the next one actually work for once, right? And they think they've got it now. I literally have a guy that's his case. And you hear his story of like everything that's gone wrong. It's kind of like the Joe Dirt episode where it's like, man, just keep going with all the crazy things you've been through in life. The poor guy has had it all. And I'm so glad to be able to help him. And I think other people will learn from the things that he's failed, where he's failed. And from my advice at the end of like, okay, Ryan, now that you're here, this is what I suggest for you moving forward. Right. Yeah. So that's the goal of Startups with Stu, is that a founder that's looking for help can find it and go, oh man, I'm so glad I listened to this because I can apply that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Speaking of startups, last question. You've been around a lot of them, including your own. What do you think is the biggest misstep that a lot of founders make? And this could be anything. I mean, we could go marketing, financing, whatever. But what do you see as the one thing you're like, oh, why do they always do that?
Me personally, my belief here is that the number one is they're not honest with themselves. Sometimes they're not honest with other people, which would be worse. But sadly, entrepreneurs are like always optimistic. They want to be positive, but sometimes in that positivity, they lie to themselves and they're not realists. And they start to talk to themselves about, oh, it'll all work out. It'll all work out. It'll all work out. But they're not actually being honest with themselves about the real problem, and then they don't face it, and then they don't work to overcome it. Entrepreneurs that succeed don't always get it right, but they face every problem with the intention to truly solve it for the long run. Versus Band-Aid here, Band-Aid there. Oh, it'll all work out. It'll fix itself. No, it doesn't fix itself. This isn't a 200 employee company where another team's going to notice your problem and just go fix it for you. This is a 3 or 5 or 10 man team. And if you don't address the real issue at hand right here, right now, you're going to die. Your business will not make it. And so, yeah, I'd say number one thing you have to do as a founder is be honest with yourself.
You could argue, too, that if you don't address it, not only will the business potentially fail, but you could be just making it worse.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, no doubt.
Stu, this was an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for being here today. Before we let you go, can you tell our audience where they can find you and what else you might have going on?
Yeah, I have a bunch of followers on LinkedIn, and I love to create content that's helpful there. You can follow me on LinkedIn, and you can go subscribe, find the Startups with Stu podcast on your podcast of choice. By the way, we have not launched as of next week. We should be live. So by the time people are watching this episode we're recording today, they should be able to go check out the first episodes. And
fantastic.
It's going to keep getting better, bigger and better, and I'm going to stick with it. So go check it out.
All right. Well, I'm going to check it out, folks. Hope you do the same. Stu, thank you so much. That was an awesome conversation, a lot of fun, and we appreciate you being here today. For all the listeners, thanks for tuning in to another episode. We appreciate the ears.
Thank you for being part of the Hustle Nation. If you're serious about raising the bar in your personal and professional life and willing to go all in on your success, head over to hustleleaders.com. Here you can get access to our Hustle Productivity ebook, attend our Hustle Masterclass, or challenge yourself to the 30-day Hustle Challenge. Pairing these tools and training with the Hustle Nation podcast will help you advance to a whole new level. Until next time, stay hungry and inspire those around you to hustle.